so those that aren't here will be able to have a look at the recording. Welcome back, everyone. It's great to see you all back, and we hope will be an interesting, fulfilling year for you, progressing towards becoming audiologists. So you are quite a large class for us, and certainly the biggest class we've had in second year. So there is still some impact of COVID, but the fact that you're a large class will have some impact on the way we do things a little bit differently to the way we have in the past. So you will see quite a bit of me in throughout the second year, both teaching but also sort of coordinating your timetable, mentoring or supporting you during placements, and so on. So we'll just work through, I've put together a PowerPoint. We can work through that to cover as much information as we can in the next hour. So at 11 o'clock, Sarosh, Raj and Dee, as well as John Coveney, are coming along to answer any questions you might have about the research projects. Okay. So, let's see. This is rather a big lecture theatre for a relatively small group, but this was the only one available today. Sure my slides will progress. Here we go. Okay, so the topics for this year, as you know already, I think most of you are enrolled in all of them, are the 3 topics in first semester and 3 in second. You've already heard about research methods and the requirements for research methods and leading into research project in second semester. So the other topics, audiology 3, I coordinate together with Sarosh. So Sarosh has talked to you, and obviously you've already had your first PBL session. So we'll talk in a moment about the other assessments, the other aspects of that topic, as well as clinical audiology 3. The primary importance around clinical audiology 3 is both focused on placements as well as some classes here in order to develop and give you a grounding in the clinical skills that you need when you're actually working with patients. So the SAMs are now on Flow, available, but I will show you those as well. Topic booklets are also now on Flow. The timetable is I've sent you a generic type timetable. It is a bit different to first year in that we do have quite a lot of guest lectures, so there can be changes and there can be variations in time, etc. So there will be updates along the way. Just to flag at this point, the O-Week timetable that I sent you, there will now be the library's no longer doing face-to-face type sessions. So that possible session is not happening. Sarosh may have directed you towards the library resources on the general audiology page. Yes or no? Yes, he did? Great. So obviously it is going to be very important around PBL again, but also around your research projects in actually being able to use those library resources, databases, etc. effectively so that you can find the most relevant literature. Okay. So I have put a timetable for next week on Audiology 3 top module. So you'll notice as well, I think for you, flow looks, certainly for staff, it looks a bit different. They've sort of modernised it, so we're still getting used to finding what we need to find in different places to edit and so on. But essentially it is the same in that there are modules, and we can set up modules for particular weeks and put in the relevant lecture notes, etc., or links to those. Okay. Oh, and the barbecue that we normally have each year, the FUSPA barbecue, is not happening this year, but I believe FUSPA, I think James is involved with FUSPA.
Yeah.
Correct? There's going to be something planned later on.
Yeah.
So, hopefully you'll get opportunities to meet the first year students at some point, as well as other students from particularly speech pathology. Okay. I don't know if you want to say anything at any point, James, about FUSPA. You're welcome to do that. Okay, so the structure of this year is clearly different from last year. You will have classes from this week until the end of week 6. And then following that, there are 7 weeks, and that's what we would call the block placement period. Okay? So we'll talk a bit more about placements and block placements shortly. So then you return from that block placement period in weeks 12 and 13. So again, we would have some classes in weeks 12 and 13, and you're also preparing, or finish preparing for your research methods presentation at the end of week 13. And then there are, as per usual, exam weeks to follow. Okay. So, just a reminder around COVID. We've been incredibly lucky here in South Australia, but we still have to be mindful of being cautious, being aware of social distancing, space requirements in rooms. Particularly in some of our smaller booths. Morning. Also cleaning booth bookings. As you had last year, you're quite, I think, familiar with the process. That we will, particularly when you're here out of hours, we'll need to continue with that process of the completing the form on Flow, the COVID form, which I will put up on Clinical Audiology 3, and booking through NHS inquiries in the usual way. If there are any hiccups with that, certainly let us know so that we can follow it up with the professional staff. So as a result of the restrictions, again, as you were doing towards the end of last year, you had small sort of prac bubbles, if you like. So we'll do something similar for practical sessions as well. And of course, stay at home when you're unwell. That goes without saying. If you are unwell and you're going to miss a session, then it would be courtesy to let whoever is taking the session know, and or myself. Okay. Right, Audiology 3. So I'll pull up the SAM in just a second, but as you know, Suresh has talked to you about PBL participation as being a essential core activity in that topic. Now, there are some lectures associated with Audiology 3, and the university has told us that lectures, unless there's a specific justification, should be online still via Collaborate. Okay, so in some instances you will have them online, in other cases you will have face-to-face, particularly if there's a short gap between a PBL session and a lecture session. So it's not necessarily realistic for you to be able to travel home. Some of you may choose to, if you can, watch sessions here within the university, but we have been asked to, or told that we are to do lectures whenever possible online. We do also have quite a number of guest lecturers in second year, in particular, for example, from the various hearing aid manufacturers, the audiologists who work in the training area, and client or clinical support come in normally and do sessions. Most of those people, if not all now, majority are interstate, and the majority are still not travelling or with very restricted exceptions. So I've been in contact with a number of those, and we're working through that, that they do sessions online via Collaborate. Some instances they may do it through Teams or Zoom, but we would send you the appropriate link if that were the case. Okay. So there is an essay assignment associated with Audiology 3, and this is something that you can start now. It's not dependent upon anything in particular. Let me just pull that up. Okay, so this is the SAM for Audiology 3. You can see the essay assignment here is not due until the end of semester, but it's well worthwhile to make a start on it as soon as you can. So the topic booklet gives you more detailed information about the assignment here. So this is an assignment about a clinical topic, about outcome measures. So your task is to select those, and there are quite a number listed here, to select 3 or 4 of those and give some thought to the ones you are selecting. So you have some sensible discussion around how they differ or how they're similar, for example. And that is an essay structure, as well as attaching appendices of summaries of the information that would be important for a clinician to have if they're considering using a particular outcome measure. So I think if you read through this description carefully and start thinking about which potential measures you will select for your essay, that would be a good thing to start as soon as possible. There's also a marking guide, if you like, here that gives you some indication of the distribution of marks. I will also post on Flow some suggested references, or possibly an audiology online lecture that gives you a bit of background to outcome measures, because the essay you want to introduce that with some broader comments, issues around the use of outcome measures. Okay. So the topic booklet and the SAM also refer to the one written exam. So there's one 3-hour written exam, and this will cover information from any of the lectures that you have, as well as the PBL. So in terms of the lectures, the emphasis is on hearing aids. So I do a number of lectures on hearing aids, hearing aid features, and the audiologists who come or do the guest lectures also talk to you not only a bit about their particular product, but also they're asked to give a generic lecture focusing on a particular hearing aid feature. So there's quite a range of advanced features, or what we call advanced features, that are available in hearing aids now, and the aim is to cover quite a number of these in specific lectures. So things like, you may have already heard in passing, things like frequency lowering technology, feedback management, noise management features, CROS or bi-CROS hearing aids, batteries or wireless technology. So there are a whole range of topics that will be covered. So we'll talk again a bit more about that in your introduction to hearing aid or advanced hearing aid lecture. Okay. So clinical audiology 3, I've already alluded to. Again, under normal circumstances, the guests from the hearing aid manufacturers give their lecture, and then we've, in past years, except for last year, run immediately afterwards a practical with hands-on with their particular hearing aids using their software. So last year, because they couldn't come, we had to, or I had to run sessions with smaller groups of students. As you can imagine, we couldn't, as we have in the past, had 5 or 6 people maybe in the booths. So that's reduced to 3, not sure if it's 4 at the moment. So what we will do is organise for them to send us hearing aids with a worksheet, and then you'll be divided into groups, and you'll have a time, an hour or so, when you come in your group and do that practical class with assistance if needed from me. So, and that will be in our booths in FMC. So I'm waiting until we have the research groups organised, and then we'll probably try and base those prac groups around the research groups. And those will be towards the end of this 6-week period, maybe a Tuesday, but I might also have to use a Friday. We do have FMC have quite an increased caseload as well, so actually obtaining booth 2 for our use has become a bit more difficult. Okay. So clinical placement's also an essential and critical part of this topic, which I'll come to placements again in a minute. So the SAMs are on flow. If you submit all your assignments, as usual, are submitted on flow using Turnitin for essays. As you know, academic integrity is something that we do take extremely seriously. So if you're in any doubt about what that means or how best to comply with that, then please revisit the information from last year. Extensions also you need to request through Flow, although it may often be also a good idea to contact your topic coordinator to discuss as well. And do remember that extensions should not be after the due date. They do need to be before the due date to be considered. So the penalties for late submission are indicated on the SAMs. And you'll find they'll be the same as they were last year. Okay. Actually, before I go into that, I'll just show you the topic booklet for Clinical Audiology 3. Now, there's quite a lot of information that I've put into the topic booklet about the assessments, because there are a number of smaller assessments. Okay. So actually I might just call up the SAM. So the SAM summarises these. The Otis exercises. So in order for you to get back into the swing of doing Otis, I don't know if you've been doing some over the break. No. Some of you, there are a number of you that have been on placement, so you've moved a step further on. But I do ask you to do this series of exercises. It makes most sense for you to do those in the lead up, if you have a placement, in the lead up to that block placement, so that you get back into the swing of it. If you've had a summer placement, it might make more sense to do those sort of more towards exam time, again, to get back into the swing of that. Okay. I think some of you that were on summer placement did some of these as well before your summer placement. For last year, I did put up some extra exercises on Flow, and we'll probably have a session as well where we combine that, you doing some of those with case history and feedback, but more about that later on. So the clinical skills assessment are the participation in these hearing aid practicals and completing the workshop sheets. So you will need to get that experience, hands-on experience with the software with hearing aids. You will be asked to make sure you attend, if you're unable to attend for whatever reason, to make up that practical exercise. There's also, we do quite a number of sessions around giving feedback to clients about results. And I'll talk in more detail about that at another session, but this is what's referred to here as the written case-based feedback of audiological results, a script. So I get you to actually write a word-for-word script around a particular case. Ooh, lost the lights. Okay. And you also will use what we call the CA learning space or the MLS system to get you to actually video yourselves giving one another feedback of results. This is so that you can then review one another's sessions and give one another some feedback in order that you can develop these skills. Okay, so this is referred to in the topic booklet, which I didn't close. Here we go. So this is detailed here, the feedback of results and the steps in the process for that. So we will have some dedicated sessions, again, where you'll work in the small groups to work through some of those exercises. Pediatric competencies is another important task for this year. Now, most, if not all of you, have observed the FMC Peds Clinic. So these competencies are about the hands-on experience in that clinic. So they're attached to the back of the topic booklet, and I also put a separate PDF on Flow. Would someone have a look at the back and see if there's somewhere to actually turn the lights on? Maybe. Oh, would they? Okay, so these, you may have heard reference to the pediatric competencies. Yes, no? No, not yet. Okay. So what they are, they're based on the Audiology Australia clinical competencies or skills and knowledge competencies that as a university, in order to obtain, in order to renew our accreditation, we're required to demonstrate that we assess students on those particular competencies. So we've listed them here. And what you will do is keep your own copy of that. So you'll need to print off a copy of that and keep it and take it with you to any FMC paediatric placement or any other paediatric placement that you may have. So it's probably best to have it with you. For example, Health to Go does have some paediatrics. Some of the other clinics that you may do block placements in do some paediatrics. I think someone over the summer had paediatrics. Yeah. Well, Diane, you were here at FMC. Yeah, and I think Stacey did as well. Yeah. So keep it with you, and normally on the block placement there will be some information sent to the clinical educators, but if you know that you're going to be doing some paediatrics, you'll need to take the initiative to remind them or say, look, I've got this form, if you would complete this for a particular paediatric session. Okay, so the idea is that throughout the sessions that you have in this area, you'll develop your skills, and this is recorded on the form, and you can see when you've reached the required level of skill. So it doesn't mean you need to be an expert on everything. There are different levels of competency, whether it's developing or whether you're considered competent as a graduate at a graduate level. Okay? Does that make sense? Yep. Okay. So yeah, you'll see that. Sorry, there's a couple of extra pages here in the topic booklet, and you'll see that it's in sections, and there are a number of sessions listed across, and this is where your clinical educator will complete this and then also at the end write any comments. So it may be at a particular session that not all of those are applicable. Depends what you're required to do, what's been seen, and it will also depend on the age of the particular child that you're seeing. So this is not used for auditory processing assessments, but for under 4s or children that require play audiometry as well. So for the Department of Ed trips, which we hope will be up and running also soon, you would also take this form along. Okay, so it will be your responsibility to keep the form, keep it completed, and then submit it. So you don't need to have completed all these competencies until the end of the year. So it's across 2 semesters. So your SAM simply states that you've made reasonable progress on those. Okay. So also in the booklet is some information about the feedback script and the video simulation. So you can have a look at that, and again, there'll be more information about that, and we can discuss it more in one of the sessions. Okay. So we also have the importance here of keeping your clinical hours records up to date using the spreadsheet to keep things up to date. Don't put everything in at the last minute. Preferably on a day-by-day or a week-by-week basis, make sure you keep that up to date. And there will be a clinical examination. It's planned for the exam period, and again there'll be more information about that to come. Yes, so just another word on exams. There should be something on here, but I can't see anything for the lights. Oh, so I'm not tall enough, is that what it is? Okay, so exams, just take a note that the supplementary exam period is the week immediately before semester 2 starts. So if you do have any plans for that period, just keep that in mind. The end of the year as well, the supplementary period is in usually early December. So just an early warning to make sure that you're still around up until mid-December, because if you do need to do a supplementary, that's the time that it normally would be. Also, clearly your research reports are actually due quite late, right at the end of the year. So if you do want to, and I don't know what the situation will be with graduations this year, whether there will be, normally at the end of the year, for any overseas students who want to graduate and leave the country. There is a ceremony, but I don't know if that will happen this year. But in that instance, if you do want to graduate early and actually have your certificate made available, then you need to let us know sort of early in or towards the middle of semester 2 would be a good idea. Okay. All right, clinical placements. Compliance, I think Wendy might have been in contact with some of you to make sure that everything's up to date with your compliance. It is important for you to check that. We've already talked about the PEDS clinic, so there are a few placements in these six weeks, normally on a Wednesday, including the PEDS clinic at FMC, as well as the Department of Ed trips. There aren't any trips actually arranged just yet. We're just in the process of negotiating a new agreement with Department of Education, and also looking at the other services that some of the Aboriginal health groups or medical centres are offering, so that we're not overlapping. So we're hopeful that there'll be some of those trips available for you to go on, because it is too early for the new first years to be going and doing that work. So this is normally a time when the second years do those trips. Block placements. So a handful of you have had a block placement. Fleur is now was last year as well, the placement education coordinator. So she's working hard to find placements. It's still, because of COVID restrictions and people's reluctance to have too many people in their clinics, it's still extremely difficult. It is normally extremely difficult. I can speak from many years' experience in sourcing those placements. So we're working as hard as we can to find people a placement. The likelihood is that each of you this year will have at least one block placement of 5 weeks. It may not be possible to have more than that. We normally have one in each semester. And we're working hard towards that, but I want to warn you that it's probably not going to be possible for everyone to have 2 block placements. So to make the most of any placement that you have is very important. Now, on the other side, the Audiology Australia hours requirement has been increased, but it is still from last year, but it is still lower than the normal. Now, we don't want you to worry about hours. That's really our concern. We don't want you to be fixated on a number of hours, because the aim of a placement is for you to gain confidence, to develop your skills as much as possible. So, although we want you to record the hours and we want you to make sure you record everything accurately, whether that's hands-on, whether that's observation, although in second year we're aiming for you to have, or you should have, very little pure observation. But there may be indirect contact where you have an involvement with appointments but you're not passively observing. Again, we'll talk a bit more about that before the next block placement period. So Fleur will be in touch. We do have a number lined up, but it's a matter of looking, and quite a few interstate placements. So Fleur will obviously consult with you around that before allocating you a particular or interstate placement. And we use that information that you filled out in the questionnaire last year to help guide where you might go, where you're interested in going. Okay. There will also be a trip to the APY lands. Now, I think you've heard about these trips to the Aboriginal lands. I think some of you have heard. So I will send out some information about that. That will be in the middle of the block placement period this time. So if you have a block placement in April, May, then you won't be able to go on this particular trip, but we hope there'll be another one at the end of the year. I don't know how many of you already put up your hand for these trips, but we may, or again, look back at the questionnaire, or again I might ask you to indicate your interest once I've sent out a description of what that trip involves. And then we may need to draw names out of a hat, or see who's on placement and who's not on placement. So yeah, it is a great trip to go on. This particular trip will be going out to the west, so right across the APY lands across towards the West Australian border. So yeah, quite magnificent, the landscape, and very amazing experience. So you can also, of course, collect paediatric hours for that trip. Okay, so for those that went on summer placement, good idea to get together to have a bit of a review, debrief of that. So we'll be organising that at some point as well. And Fleur alerted to me the fact that the Healthy for Life screening clinic is going on. Now, did any of you participate in that last year? I understand this is a clinic where you have the opportunity to do sort of case history taking, generic case history taking around health. So you can access this via the link on Flow. You need to do induction activities or induction online activities, I think, first, and then you can register. So if you can find a time when you're available, you can book in yourselves for that. And I think that can be counted as probably professional or indirect activity, as it's not specific to audiology, but you should still count it in your hours. So a few additional matters. Class reps, again, you can select and decide amongst yourselves who you'd like your class reps to be, whether they're the same people as last year or new people. That's up to you as a group, but let me know as soon as you do have some class reps, because I'd like to organise a meeting with them. Audiology Australia, are many of you members of Audiology Australia? Quite a few nods. If you're not, it is a very good idea to join now, if you haven't. It's an online process. It is will only cost you about $20, I think, maybe a bit more now. Okay. And you do get the information through the website, through the Audiology Now magazine you have access to, and also you'll get information around jobs via email, which can be helpful towards the end of the year as well. And it is much easier then to convert, once you have an internship position, to convert to full member rather than going from no membership to full membership. So I'd recommend you do it now, because there is a cut-off time somewhere next semester where it's no longer possible to join as a student member. Okay. And there may be, not sure of the situation this year, but there may be some eligibility for placement funding. There is an online conference going ahead next year, so it may be as well that there's some benefit in being a member around fees if you're able to attend any of those events. Okay. If any of you need to look into assistance around disability plans, you know that you can access the health and counselling service to do that, and it is important that you notify your topic coordinators if you have such a plan. Okay. So any concerns during the course, you can of course contact the counselling and the health service, and also my role is course coordinator. I'm your topic coordinator, I'm your course coordinator, and I'm also what's called student engagement coordinator. So if you're having difficulties or concerns about your progress through the course, then we can sit down and work through the issues and look for solutions or options for you. Okay, so the same applies with student services as last year. As you know, we don't have any administrative support on level 7 any longer. And finally, employment preparation. So, as you are aware, at the end of, or once you've completed the degree, then the next step, if you're remaining in Australia, is to look for an internship position. So this is normally a 12-month full-time position with a clinic. So throughout this year, and some of the employers have tended to start quite early in wanting to provide you with information about their organisation, and then organise interviews and offer positions. So this is normally mediated through me. They'll ask around the timetable, availability of students, and then we'll send out a flyer and say, so-and-so is holding an information evening on such and such a day. You can register for it by following this link, etc. So we don't participate in those sessions, we simply forward on the information. Okay, so yeah, my advice when thinking around jobs is the need to be flexible. Think about if you can, consider interstate. If you can, consider rural locations. Then your chances of finding a position will increase. Okay, there is also quite a lot of support through the university to prepare for this process of applying for positions and being interviewed, and first and foremost actually preparing a suitable CV. There is a careers centre, and they run quite a lot of sessions online. There's a lot of information on their website, and I have put a link to that on Flow as well. So it's worthwhile, looking at, even early on, looking at maybe doing a course. How do you set out the CV if you haven't had experience of that, or how is it done now to be most effective? Okay. Any questions? None at all? You're all overwhelmed? So it is quite a busy, demanding year. But I hope you'll find that it's really rewarding and interesting as well. Okay, we'll have a couple of minutes break before we're expecting the other staff.